coming out on this rainy Halloween. But more important, thank you for attending the Cannabis-Aid event, and it show a lot of support for the movement, the organization. But we really want to thank you for coming out here to learn more about the cannabis industry and security and how security can help you in your businesses. We have assembled what I believe to be the finest panelists that you can get that are available today. We have experts in nearly every facet of the security, and today we're looking to tap into their knowledge because at the end we're going to have a Q&A available for you, and please feel free to ask questions at any time. But as I've got to know these individuals, these professionals, I found out that they were as passionate about this industry as I am. They all want to make the industry, the sector, a success, not only from a business perspective, but also from a medicinal point. And one of the ways to make this such a successful operation is to integrate the appropriate security measures at each of our different facilities, the licensed facilities. But overall, I learned from talking to these professionals that their goals were the same as mine. And that was to ensure that each patient and employee who enters a facility are safe while they're there, before they walk in, and after they leave. That the medicine the patients receive is the best possible and the safest. And let's be honest, we're all in this not only because it's a passion, but it's also a business. We have bills to pay, and we want to keep that currency safe, the money you do make from it. Now, what will we be discussing today? We'll be going over an end user's point of view, and I'll make an introduction shortly. We're going to talk about physical security for cannabis facilities, both on the technology and the security officer side. We're talking about cybersecurity for cannabis facilities, and we're going to talk about security protocols and procedures. And then at the end, we're going to talk about the importance of establishing positive liaison with local law enforcement, LARA, BMMR, and how do you go about doing that? Because that's going to be a key to your success. But before I go any further, let me tell you a little bit something about myself before I introduce our esteemed panel. My name is Bill Cousins. I own W.J. Cousins and Associates. We're a security consulting and investigative firm based out of Troy, Michigan. I'm retired from the Secret Service after 22 years. Went on to become director of security at 2 major manufacturing corporations. Went on my own about 4 or 5 years ago, and got into the cannabis industry about 2 years ago, and that's been 90% of my business, and I love it. I love working with the people in the industry. Every day I'm learning something new. So enough about me. I'd like to introduce our first panelist, because she's what we would consider to be an end user. In other words, she's representing you. Her name is Jennifer Brown. Jen, why don't you tell us a little bit of something about your position, how you got to that position, because we're going to be leaning on you real heavy with questions.
No pressure, right? Good morning, everybody. My name is Jen Brown, and I am the Director of Security for Green Peak Innovations. We are based in the Lansing area. We currently have 12 Class C licenses. We have an R&D facility that's about 16,000 square feet, and a new facility that's coming up with license expected in December that is 66,000 square feet. My background is in law enforcement. I spent almost 16 years as a police lieutenant in the mid-Michigan area, and I didn't expect to ever leave law enforcement. In fact, it was kind of an inside joke at the police department that we'd all be wheeling each other around in wheelchairs. It was just something I absolutely loved, but I had an opportunity come about 5 years ago to work in the private sector. I did some consulting with the Class 1 railroads, the short line railroads, and sports venues across the United States, both professional and collegiate. That company got bought out at the end of the year last year, and so I started keeping my eyes open for a job, and I had a friend who worked across the hall from the guys that owned this company. And she said, well, you know, I think I have a job opportunity for you. And I said, well, what is it? She says, well, it's in security. And I said, well, got any more details? And she said, well, it's in marijuana. I'm like, what? A former cop can't do that. So I thought, you know, I have not interviewed for a job position in 22 years. At least it'll be good experience. So I went for the job interview. I absolutely loved the owners of the company, loved what he had to say about Green Peak Innovations and kind of where it was going to go in the future. Got home, got on the internet like most people do, and started to do some research about this industry, and absolutely fell in love with the idea of it and where Michigan is going to take this industry. So the rest is history.
Our next panelist is Mr. Paul Tylenda, who happens to be an attorney. Don't hold that against him. But he's also co-founder and owner of Griffin Security. Paul, tell us a little.
Hi, my name is Paul Tylenda. I'm one of the founding members and the chief compliance officers for Griffin Secure Transport. We are a secure transport company focused on the facilities license here. We have a location in Harrison Township. My background as an attorney, I've been a cannabis attorney since the medical marijuana program rolled out in 2009. So I've been through every phase and stage of the confusion and what was known as the gray area prior to clients of mine, other people who were involved with, got the momentum together to create the force that resulted in what is now the MMFLA. The industry in terms of cannabis in Michigan has been modeled in efforts on what we saw happen out west. And the one anomaly that we have in Michigan is secure transport. We're the only state that has a mandate to have the product taken by a separate licensee from location to location. That creates an industry here in Michigan where we are not a luxury, we are a necessity. If you want the product off of your property or onto your property, you will have to hire a secure transporter. Again, that's very different from what happened out west. What we find in our industry too is that because we are responsible from taking it from the producer to the end retailer, our insurance concerns, our safety concerns are more or less on the road. Unlike some of the other panelists, they have safety concerns and security concerns that focus around either one static location or one known set of circumstances, whereas a lot of what we deal with has to do with the in-transit type of security, problems you may see on the roadside, and the like, just in making sure that the product that gets on the truck ends up at the retail location. There are a ton of security interplays where we show up and we're on camera. We are on camera throughout the whole process, and when we show up at the retail location, we are also on camera. So unlike, again, some of the other situations where you are constantly monitored in one static location, we have other security concerns that are ever present and ever revolving around just the nature of the fact that we are traveling down the road. We're a little more susceptible to surprises, and we have to prepare for that. But again, in this industry, I don't think that our problems or the uniqueness of secured transport in Michigan will present anything different than what's already occurring out west.
Thanks, Paul. Our next panelist is Rudy Patros. He's the owner and president of Securatech. Rudy?
Hi, everybody. My name is Rudy, like you said, with Securatech. We are a full-service security company. We provide alarms, cameras, access control, low-voltage wiring. We got into this business, the cannabis side, because some of our clients that were existing clients got into the industry. And with our team and our staff, engineers, we're able to design a system from start to finish and help through all of the guidelines. And not only just do the state minimum, but really get a solution for the customer, figure out what they're trying to do, how they want to do it. There's so much details in the security aspect of this business that you can't just hire any security guy or alarm company or one man in a truck operation to really guide you, because it's not only the safety of your employees and your clients, it's how you run your business, it's how you view your cameras, how you interact with your guards, how you interact with your customers, how you let people in, how you talk to people. And it's really something that has to be engineered from the beginning of the project all the way through, no matter which license you're applying for or how big or small you are. So it's something that we've kind of perfected and we've done very well with, and our customers are very happy. So we're excited to be in this industry along with the other industries that we're in as a company as a whole. Thank you.
Thanks, Rudy. Our next panelist is John Rathwell. John is a partner owner of DES Security. John?
How you doing today? My name is John Rathwell. I'm co-owner of Detection Systems Engineering. We're a security integrator based in Troy, Michigan. Our company was formed in 1967 by Jarvis Williams, who at that time was not only an entrepreneur, but he was an inventor of day-night television cameras for security applications. So our founder was actually making and patenting surveillance cameras 51 years ago. We then kind of transitioned from there into commercial, industrial, banking, corrections, utilities, and we found that our skill sets in fairly highly regulated industries for security, such as utilities, banking, and corrections, would transition well into cannabis. So a number of years ago, we started transitioning some of our marketing efforts towards the cannabis industry, since we had experience working in regulated industries as far as security. Myself personally, I've been involved in security for over 30 years. I've worked for major manufacturers of surveillance systems, access control systems, worked for major integrators of those systems, and then became co-owner of Detection Systems and Engineering from there.
Thanks, John. Our next panelist is David Beckett, founder and owner of 710 Security. David?
Thanks, everybody, for coming out. My story is a little bit different. I lived in Connecticut, and I've always been a cannabis advocate, and in around -- I took a nice vacation to Colorado in the Rocky Mountains and absolutely fell in love with it and told myself this is where I want to be. 2008, the economy crashed. I had the ability then to pack up my things and move to Colorado exactly on Halloween of 2008. So it's kind of an odd day today. So with that being said, when I worked for ADT at the time, I would always joke around when my phone rang and I would answer my phone, high-tech security. And the reason was that because I was the technician that was high. And so I always thought it was a funny joke. No one ever really got it. So when I moved to Colorado, I actually opened High Tech Security LLC, and I did a lot of installations for subcontracting ADT dealers and ADT contractors. We literally saw the cusp of right when we went to legalization. ADT and the big dogs stepped in and sold a lot of these facilities, systems and procedures and everything that they could do to get some money off of these clients. And then the next day did not turn their systems on because they had federal accounts and they wouldn't service them. So being on the forefront of that, being yelled at by the client, I really did see the opportunity firsthand on how small businesses are now able to step in the door and kind of service this massive industry that is now getting the Heisman from the big companies. So moving along a little bit down the line, we saw the trials and tribulations there. I worked for a company called Cannabis Security America, which was the first electronic security company. So we started opening up the nationwide platform. So we started opening up the New Jersey, Washington, and Oregon started to come online. So a lot of the regulations were starting to come into play. And how we noticed how some were getting copied and pasted from one state to another. And then the reduced fine tweaks to say, hey, we're going to add secure transportation to it. So with that, we've seen the industry kind of have its need for security and why it's developed into the areas that it is, from the amount of break-ins we've seen to the what's on the news. So 710 Security has now opened its doors just a few months ago after my company got sold and acquired. And we are designated right now, to service the cannabis facilities and design security platforms that's obviously not going to provide a black eye to this industry so we could all move forward and keep this, keep the green rush and keep this prohibition thing over.
Thank you, David. And last but not least is Oz Chugtai. He's the owner of Security and Protective Services. Oz?
Hi, my name's Oz with Security and Protective Services. I'm the owner. Thank you guys all for coming out tonight. The company is only 2 years old. We're a newer security company, and what we do is physical security. So we have armed security, unarmed security on your property. My background is heavy in retail security, retail fraud detection, employee fraud detection. I've been in the security field for about 12 to 13 years. I've actually managed a security company prior breaking off and starting my own. So I felt with the transition in dealing with retail and the customer service base that we have set up in the retail world, making the transition into cannabis was very easy because it's very similar. You guys, as the end users, are retail stores at the end of the day. So being physical security for that was a very easy transition. And now with just being 2 years old, the cannabis side is at least 40 to 50% of our business. And we're hoping to keep growing that here.
All right, thanks, Oz. Now we're going to move on. We'll start with the questions. And poor Jen's going to get hit hardest at this point. And again, the reason is she represents what you are, which is the end user. So if you're looking to get into this business and start an operation, she's dealing every day with the headaches that you're going to have to deal with. So we thought it was best to put her on the spot because she can give us a lot of knowledge based on her experiences. So the first question is, Jen, what should a company starting in the cannabis industry look for when hiring a security manager or director of a security company?
So I was hired on as the director of security, but what I have found is that I am the director of security, I'm the director of safety, I'm the director of compliance, I'm the director of emergency management. So I would recommend finding either a person or a company that can provide broad services across the board. So while security is definitely important, you also have to have other things in place. So you also have to have safety and compliance. You have to have business continuity plans. So those all come together. So it's important to find a person or a company that can handle all aspects of that, from the planning to the implementation, and then again, the customer service portion of it afterwards, making sure that those plans actually come to fruition and make sure that the employees are following all of those plans. I think those are very important things to look for in either a company or a person that you guys are hiring for those positions. Okay.
But what are some of the best practices Green Peak is using right now, such as type of security equipment, working closely with the IT department, IT security, things along those lines? Do you have any best practices that you can pass on to our audience here?
Sure. So Green Peak Innovations, as I'd mentioned, we have 2 grow facilities in Lansing, and then we have 19 provisioning centers that will be opening throughout the state in the next year or so. So we want to create these best practices that spans across all of our facilities, and we want to go above and beyond what the state has set. So as you guys are probably aware, the state has set some mandates, especially with regards to security. So we have to have cameras, we have to have access control. Those are, you know, kind of basics. But we want to go above and beyond. We want to go ahead and set higher standards for our company. And again, that is a recommendation for all of you guys that have businesses that are opening. So for example, just as Bill had said, security equipment. In my experience in this industry and my experience in law enforcement, you basically get for what you pay. So if you want to go, you know, and try to save money in your budget, you're going to get a system that may not be as efficient. So I would recommend, again, doing your due diligence and research and go with a company that provides quality equipment that you know is going to last a long time and know that it's going to be operable at all times. Again, that is a state mandate that you're making sure that your equipment is always working and have some fail-proof systems in place. So again, you want to find a company or a camera, or whether it's Intrusion. You want to find a company that goes above and beyond what those state standards are. In terms of IT, that is definitely not my strong suit. So again, make sure that you have somebody on staff that is very familiar with IT so that they can work closely with companies such as the folks here on stage. You want somebody on your IT team that can walk the walk and talk the talk and know how to get all those things implemented so that, again, it's an efficient system, but again, one that is above and beyond the state mandates. Those are a couple of the things we're doing in terms of best practices. Another thing, Bill, is our employees. We want to create a company and a culture at Green Peak Innovations where we're hiring quality employees that want to stay. I think you guys may be familiar with the fact that about 80% of thefts at our facilities, or facilities like you guys are opening, are from the employees. And so again, we want to hire an employee that isn't going to be tempted to take things from the company. We want them to believe in the company, believe in the industry, and again, making sure that we're hiring those quality individuals. We're doing background checks. Again, that is a state mandate, but we're going above and beyond. We're doing a more comprehensive background check than what the state has mandated. We have set higher standards than what the state has mandated. So again, our criminal disqualifiers for our employees are higher than what the state mandates. And again, once we get those employees in the door, we want to make sure that we're offering them benefits better than what other companies are offering across the United States. I think I read a recent statistic that only about 45% of cannabis companies are offering full benefits, so medical, dental, and vision insurance. We're offering all of those because, again, we want to attract a quality employee that is going to stay with us long term. We want to make sure that we're hiring employees that want to stay and not create turnover. So again, those are a couple of the best practices that we're doing at Green Peak Innovations.
Right. Switching gears a little bit, Jen, you talked about there's a lot of different types of equipment and so forth out there that you can select from. Pass on to our audience, from your perspective, what do you look for from a potential vendor when they come out? Because as they open their facilities or they're getting their licenses, there's good vendors, there's quality vendors. We got the quality people here, but there's some out there that I would say I'm a little skeptical about. So from your perspective, what would you advise them to look for?
Sure, that's a great question. Both in my experience in this industry as well as law enforcement, we worked with a ton of equipment vendors when I was a police officer, everything from our weapons to equipment, uniforms, etc. So it's the same thing to look for. One is a quality product. Make sure that you're doing your research on these vendors and these companies to make sure they're offering you a quality product. Make sure that you're checking with references that they have, and go above and beyond that. Find out a company that they are working with that they may not share with you, again, to make sure that they're providing a quality product. Number two, I would say, is cost. I mean, bottom line is we want to make sure that we're meeting our budget, that we're not spending more than we actually need to. So those two things are very important. And then I would say lastly is customer service. And to me, customer service aspect is probably just as important as the cost and the quality of the product, because once that sale is made, then where is that vendor at? So I think the vendors that are providing those quality products at a great cost are great, but I also want a company that if I have a problem with their product, or I have a question, or I need to know something right away, they're quick to respond via email, they're quick to return my phone call, and again, I can answer, or ask questions of those vendors and get an answer that's quickly when I need it. Those are three important qualities of a vendor, and those are the three things that I look for.
Okay, and for right now, the last question for you is
on the hot spot here.
What keeps you up at night? What do you, when you get home and you're trying to relax, what are you thinking about from the business? I mean, what are your fears? Sure.
Well, there's a couple of them, but I think the biggest concern that I have right now is our employee safety. I think if you read about what happens in other states, The incidences do happen at these facilities, primarily the provisioning centers, whether it's a robbery or theft. Again, my responsibility as director of security is to make sure that my employees are safe, my employees come to work, they have a positive experience, and then they go home safely at the end of the day. I can do everything I can as a director of security, from cameras to having guards in place, to having prox access, to having policies and procedures that all of the employees are aware of. We can train to all of those policies. But there's certain unknowns that I don't have any control over. So if we want to have a situation come up, whether it's a criminal that comes in and that has an armed robbery situation, or some kind of situation that just happens naturally with our employees, whether a heart attack or medical situation, those are all the things that keep me up at night. I worry about those employees, and again, I want to do the best job as I can to make those employees safe. And again, that should be your primary goal, whether you're opening a company in the industry or whether you are a vendor. You want to do what you can to make those employees safe. And again, making sure that your guests and customers coming into those facilities also feel that safety as well.
Thank you. Take a rest.
Thank you.
All right, then we're going to move on to the physical security, a little bit more about that. And this question is directed to Rudy, John, and Dave. Please advise our audience, tell our audience about what kind of security technology is required by the state. Right now we have the emergency rules, but later next month we're supposed to get the more permanent rules. What are you gentlemen experiencing out there in dealing with it? Go ahead, whoever wants to start, and go ahead.
All right. I guess from a client standpoint, they don't want to go through this twice. So the biggest thing is looking at what the emergency rules are right now and going above and beyond that. And from a guard standpoint, one of our biggest things at Securatech is protecting the guards, giving them backup, giving them besides just being able to look at the cameras, having cameras smart enough to let them know somebody's crossing a line they shouldn't cross. All the cameras that we're doing at our major grow facilities have either analytics behind them, artificial intelligence behind them. They're not just outdoor cameras because that's what the state requires, but it's not what it takes to really keep a safe facility. And the biggest thing is looking at how they're going to operate, how many guards they're going to have. Are they going to have 2 guards? Are they going to have 1 guard? Where are people coming in from? Where do guests come in from? Is there an intercom system? Is there, you have your basics, but there's so much more that you can do and be prepared for, because if you go far enough, without going crazy with money, because I know everybody has a budget and you can't just keep adding things, you got to look at the operation more than the state guidelines. I like to sit down with the security director, whoever the guard company is, the owners, and say, okay, how are we going to make this place flow from a safety and security standpoint? And if you can have that meeting and be in there preliminary where you can get the technology in there, whether it's new construction or it's an add-on, that really takes you to where you need to be. It's crucial to me. When I get the customer who calls me who says, I just want the state guidelines, I can't afford anything else, honestly, I send them somewhere else, because it's just not going to work. They're going to want a cheap camera that we don't even sell, or they're going to want to try to do something themselves, and it's just not going to get them to where they need to be. I know that they're not going to be in this business long term, and I don't want to be the security company where something happens and the security failed because the customer wanted to take that shortcut. That's just not how Securatech operates. It's not how I operate.
John, David, any comments?
Yeah, to build on that, your expertise is not security per se, right? So when you go into this, hire somebody like a security consultant, that is their expertise. They'll help navigate these regulations for you. The other thing a security consultant can do for you is then vet companies like us and Rudy to bring to you, to the table, security companies that know the industry, know the regulations, know the technologies, so that you're not trying to piece these things together. You've got other things on your plate as a business owner or general manager of your facility. So get people that know the regulations, they know the security industry, they know the players, they know the technologies, and allow them to help you navigate the security minefield, if you will, as you start opening your facilities.
Dave?
I'm going to have to second everything these guys are saying. I mean, it's all about having someone with the experience that at least have seen regulations in one state prior. If you're right now trying to guess what the new future regulations are going to be and go above and beyond them, that's a dangerous battle to go down as well. I mean, we've seen different states pull things out of the hat that just don't make any sense. Pennsylvania, for instance, put 4 years of video retention on there, where you're talking about petabytes of storage to keep your video on there, and no would you ever need 4 years of video storage. So, it's a dangerous minefield, as like you're saying, when you're trying to navigate that. But make sure you do buy quality products, something that has some sort of a warranty, really not flying the Chinese flag. That's one of the things that, we're in the electronics space, so we can literally Google something and find something for $20, and you could also buy the same product that's $10,000. So, there's a huge range in the electronics world. So find someone that knows the regulations, kind of has the geek quality, I guess you could say, to know all the different technologies out there, and be able to have that conversation, to sit down at the table, as he was saying before, with the guard company, the owner, and kind of build the flow that you need to secure the facility and build the culture and create that security hygiene that we all need.
Thank you, guys. We talked about, you guys mentioned cameras, access control, and intrusion devices. What, and this is a pretty broad question, but what are some of the newest devices that are out there? Like, David, when I was at your location here, you had the chart, the size chart with a camera.
Yes, sir.
To get the picture. Talk about a device like that that's relatively inexpensive, but for provisioning center.
That's a perfect example of regulation rules written and try to making them work. If you take a look at regulations at almost every state, it says that you have to have a clear and visual presence of someone coming in and out of an egress door. Kind of just someone coming in and out of your facility, you need a clear shot of their face. With that, they're also allowing the clear shot to be VCR style quality. So that's undetermined on what is actually clear in today's world when we can have 4K TVs. So that's one of the things, and the height strip camera is an example of a product that we actually went out and searched just to make sure of the rule writing application portion of having a facial recognition coming in and out of the building. One of the best ways to do that is with a camera that's sitting at 5'5", 2 inches away from the door frame, and it has a 180-degree view. So even if a gentleman walks in there with a hat, you're going to at least see his face. And that's really what the rule is written over. And if you don't have that high strip camera, technically, if you want to be a rule mongrel, you're not under regulation because you don't have that clear and present facial shot. So there's an example of trying to find a product due to someone in a boardroom wrote a rule.
Okay. Rudy, John, what do you?
The camera technologies are changing quickly. Analog is dead. If you get a security systems integrator that comes in and starts talking to you about analog, run. Digital IP cameras is where you want to be. The cost of those are coming down tremendously. They've got great different kinds of cameras now that are 360-degree cameras, panoramic cameras. They offer the video analytics, where you're only taking all this video data that you're mining, but now you're kind of taking that video data that you've got, that you're holding, and being able to slice and dice that data based on different algorithms that the cameras and the technology will do. One of the things I would suggest, you as a provider in this industry would be look for integrators that have direct relationships with manufacturers. In our industry, you can go to a security distribution house, and as long as you've got an account on file with them, you can buy pretty much anything that they're selling, and it's kind of a one man in a van provider. And I think the gentleman that sit up here with me would, probably tell you, that is probably not a good provider for you. One of the things you get if you go with a systems integrator that deals directly with the manufacturer is the manufacturer vets these integrators as well. So they're only going to have so many integrators in a geographic area to sell their products. So they're going to vet the very best security systems integrators in those geographic areas to allow them to sell their product. So that would be one of the things I would ask your security systems integrator. Do you have direct relationships with manufacturers?
Rudy?
I definitely agree with that. There's not a meeting that I've been to where I don't bring the manufacturer's rep in, because it's funny if we're going to a meeting and somebody's got a bunch of quotes, and let's say some of these facilities we have up to 300 cameras in, they have 300 of the same exact cameras. Now you can't have 300 of the same exact cameras because you're looking at 300 different things, and you gotta have the specific camera for the specific application. And it's because they go to a distributor and they just try to find a cheap camera, and so everything has got to be customized, and there's just got to be a lot of planning behind it. Security is the one thing in this industry that you really just can't take a shortcut on, because it'll come back to haunt you. And unfortunately, it's a high-risk industry because there is theft, there is robbery, there is employee issues, and you gotta find the right integrator who has the relationships with the manufacturers, who has service to back you up, but also has experience in the industry. If I was building a facility like yours, there's no way in the world I would hire somebody who's never done one before, and say, use you as the guinea pig. You gotta have the experience, because you learn from experience, and it's going to take you to where you need to be. And you're going to know in that application, we used that specific camera there, it didn't work great, so we're switching it over to this camera. We swap cameras, and I'm sure you have also a bunch of times, because you know what, that just didn't work right. And I'm an anal perfectionist with my clients. If it's not the way I want it, I'm switching it out. The customer's not even going to know it or pay for it. It has to be the best scenario for the client to work the best way. And the other thing I just want to emphasize on, training the guards on site is just as important as the equipment that you install. We've installed systems in places where they have changeover in their guards, and guess what? They don't know how to use the system. So one of the things this industry has to do is really spend some money on quality security guards who are going to know the technology that they have on site to back them up. Because that's one issue. I'll see people spend a ton of money with me, but then they're hiring cheap security guards who just aren't smart enough to manage our software and manage the system. So that's something that we're seeing a change in also.
That's going to lead us into a question here in the near future.
I was helping you out there.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
If I could add to that also.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Being as a physical security thing,
absolutely.
That's 110% correct. You see a lot of dispensaries and a lot of provisionaries that have all these nice high-tech equipment. But when we go in there and for training, you have the people there have no clue how to use this to its potential. And I feel like you're losing a lot out on that, because you have this equipment here, and if you don't have the properly trained person to run it, to observe it, you're losing out on it. So especially when you come into situations where if you have security breaches, wall breaches, being able to take a look at the equipment that you guys have set up for us to counteract that, it's very important to make sure everything is safe and secure as a whole.
What I always advise my clients when we're sitting down at the very beginning and we talk about cameras, and before I present integrators and proposals and so forth, I always tell them you want cameras that are going to give you evidentiary quality recordings. And what do I mean by that? Simply, the case is going to go to court. The prosecutor is going to play the recording, the video. The jury's going to have to look at it and say, yeah, that is Bill Cousins, the defendant. There can't be any doubt in their mind to get a conviction. And I think we can all agree with that. Go ahead, Dave.
Right to add on that real quick with the Chinese camber portion.
I got a section on that too.
The version of the $20 versus the more expensive camera is exactly that. There's a watermark date and time stamp that's admissible in court. And if you don't have that watermark timestamp, and that's just a little feature that a camera will have and that makes it cheaper and more expensive, then your $100,000 security system that you put in your facility is not even going to allow you to win the court battle. So those are all the little things and why we all research the products we install.
All right, we took a look at this from a higher end. Now I'm going to get real basic question. Could you explain to the audience the difference between a 2 megapixel camera and an 8 or a 12 megapixel? What is a megapixel? So when they're talking to their security consultants or their integrators, and the integrator says, hey, I'm going to put in a 4 megapixel, I want them to be educated to know exactly what they're getting. Gentlemen?
Boy, the megapixel world right now is kind of funny. They keep making these cameras that go into a higher and higher megapixel. They're into 12 megapixel cameras, and then the issue with that is retaining the video on the hard drive space. You'll start to eat up real quick, and you're not going to meet your mandated goal if you start adding a whole bunch of 12 megapixel cameras in there. On top of that, the machines that you're purchasing doesn't have enough throughput to really display that image properly. So it's very similar to like getting your Blu-ray DVD player, and you're going to try to connect it with the really old 1980 cable to your TV. It's going to get bogged down through the actual cable, and no matter how much the resolution is really pumping out, you're also just hurting the rest of the machine. So it's really, really important to what they call balance your load, or at least to a lot of these cameras that have 12 and 6 megapixel capabilities. You can dial into the camera and then actually make it lower. So you can make that camera 1 megapixel or 2 megapixel, just so it kind of stays at the standard of your other cameras, unless, of course, it's a high quality area. Some of the things that we recommend on like a trim area when there's a lot of product being on a capability of getting stolen or diversion to happen, that's a real good spot for a 12 megapixel camera or a 6 megapixel camera right above that, because that's what's going to allow you to, if you've ever done it before, is zoom in to a photo. And you'll notice, even if it's a logo, that if you're able to zoom in and it kind of gets clearer again while you zoomed in, that's really what we're looking for, because that's what's going to hold the court case.
Thank you. Rudy or John?
Before
we go, what is a megapixel?
So a megapixel is just the number of pixels that you're viewing on the camera image.
Okay.
As was mentioning, 2 megapixel, and then you can go up, there's 30 megapixel cameras today. And it really depends on the scene that you're looking at. General surveillance is generally, in an open area is going to be 2 to 3 megapixel camera. But now I want to be able to see facial recognition. I want to be able to read a license plate. All right, well now I need to probably go up to like a 5 megapixel camera. Then we have customers that want to read barcodes of different font sizes before products get shipped out. Well, now maybe I need to go to a 12 megapixel or a 29 megapixel camera. So it's all going to depend on the application that you're looking at. General surveillance of a parking lot or in an area of a production facility, 2 to 3 megapixels generally acceptable. But as you wanted to get more finite detail of either a face, a license plate, a barcode of different font sizes before product gets shipped out, then you start to go up to higher megapixels at that point.
Okay.
So a megapixel is 1,000,000 pixels.
Correct.
Each megapixel is 1,000,000 pixels. So you can separate those as depending on how, to blow up. Megapixels is probably like the most overrated thing people talk about in the camera world. They think they need all these megapixels. They don't. Number one, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. David. Well, like David said, the brains to process that when you have 100 or 200 or 300 cameras is crazy. So using a 4 megapixel camera, a 2 megapixel camera, and a broad view is totally fine. What really needs to be discussed is where you're positioning that camera. You don't need to be way up there if you need to see something down here. Find a better way to mount that camera, and you don't need such a powerful camera, so you're not eating up your bandwidth. Your processor doesn't need to be a Ferrari, and you can make it work way better. And that's when people sell Chinese equipment, because they're notorious for it. They'll sell every camera is 15 megapixels. It just doesn't work, And customers say, hey, why aren't you giving me 15 megapixels? This guy is. So you kind of, the megapixel thing is the most overrated topic in CCTV, in my opinion. I don't know if the guys feel the same way. You can get away with 4, 6, 8 megapixel cameras on high areas. It's the positioning of the camera that's way more important than the megapixels of it, and the quality of the camera, the quality of the lens in the camera, the motherboard in the camera, not just the megapixels of the camera.
Yeah, that's, I mean, the processor inside the camera, as Rudy said, you could have a Chinese manufacturer says, oh, this is a 15 megapixel camera, but it's got a really cheap, inefficient processor in it. So you're looking at that image and you're looking at another camera that's only maybe 4 megapixels, but you're like, and your eyes know, right? You're like, that camera's actually a better image, you know, even though it's maybe a quarter of the megapixel size. It depends on the technology that's in the camera and the processor itself.
One thing to see that when people buy cameras is if you go to a Costco or a Sam's Club and you see a camera kit, and it may be made by Samsung, and one of us might be selling Samsung cameras. Those are not the same cameras. It's a different lens, it's a different processor in the cameras. So the specs on the box might look like what our quote looks like, but if you dig a little deeper, it's just not the same camera. And people just need to know that.
And I'd like to add on that, Costco sells those cameras, but they don't have them installed.
True.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to take a break from the security technology for a little bit, give these guys a rest. And now we're going to come over and we'll have Oz and Paul earn their lunch here. And these questions will be for both of you to answer because you both work together and go hand in hand. Regarding security officers and transport officers, what type of training do you provide them, or will you provide your officers for the cannabis industry?
For our transporters, law mandates that we have 2 occupants in the vehicle, similar to the way the armored cars do it, where there's a set of eyes and a set of hands, ideally. For our training, we have, as one of our owners and officers is a Marine Corps captain. Extensive experience in a lot of hand-to-hand and all their security trainings, military police type tactics. Our goal is to hire ex-military and police officers. There's been, as you've seen here too, there's plenty of work to be done after they reach their retirement time, and they're usually the best ones that have the most sophisticated training and experience, that even if we sat down to train somebody from the ground up and take them from someone who's never been into security to make them a fully effective security transporter, it would take longer than it would be to capitalize on somebody's existing set of skills. So in that regard, because we're not looking to employ hundreds of bodies, we can take a better selection of the ones that we can use and utilize their skills more appropriately to say, well, we know the driver here has extensive evasive driving training, has some practical experience in actually handling a larger vehicle at larger speeds, again, evasive training, and then we have the co-pilot navigator, the person riding shotgun, literally and figuratively sometimes, who creates their security presence. Because again, unlike these facilities where the danger comes to you at a fixed location, with secure transport, we face every possibility from being roadblocked to being T-boned to every possible fear that exists in the armored car industry, but we're not conspicuous. So that's the one thing that benefits in terms of our security for our employees. They're not out there with, you know, a shotgun strapped to their back wearing a big shirt that says, I deliver marijuana, in a truck that is covered in a marijuana leaf. No, it's the same question goes, is that you recognize and you remember when you see an armored car on the road. Can you tell me the last time you saw a white van delivering pharmaceuticals? No, because they're not conspicuous. They blend in. You think it's a painter, you think it's a carpenter. It's not an obvious target. It's not an obvious delivery van. And with that, because of our lack of conspicuousness, our employees don't have to be so pronounced. You know, again, we're not having a guy get out of the car Rambo style with the AR pointing around and clearing a perimeter. You know, our goal is to get in and get out and you never see us. So a lot of our training, a lot of the protocol that we have has to do with maintaining the inconspicuousness, which we believe is the height of our security. If you just think we're a painting van showing up to bid on a job, we're not a target. You know, we have other security protocol in place that makes us less likely to be followed. We have some chase cars and some follow car procedures depending on the scenario. So in terms of the actual training, you know, we leave that to our the internal executive, but we mostly want to capitalize on already qualified individuals who want to get into this industry.
Us?
It's very similar. We also try to hire veterans and ex-military, ex-police, and actually current criminal justice students. Is what our main goal is what we kind of go through, because they already know the basic training and the basic mindset that you need when you're working as a security guard at one of these provisionaries. Now the difference is we're a red flag. We are standing right up front or sitting up in the front, so we're typically one of your first people you will see when you walk into a provisionary, and we have a big huge white lettering that says security right here. So they know we're security. So if somebody is trying to come into a facility, we are typically the #1 target. So having that training to be aware, we also do the normal firearm training, the pepper spray training, the taser training. That's the tools we use. But the real training comes into place is how for our guards is to read body language, how to see the personnel coming in and take a quick assessment to see what could possibly happen next, and being ready and available and aware of what your next step is. So knowing, especially actually working with the technology people, knowing where the cameras are placed, how to properly use them, you can see if there are any breaches behind you or in the other exteriors, on how to properly gauge and take care of that situation. Other main thing when you're dealing with provisionaries, you're dealing with people on a day-to-day basis. So our main training also comes into customer service. You do not want a hothead with a gun, just basically, I'm security, and you see it on a lot of other places. You need somebody who is cool, calm, collective, that can talk any situation down before they have to resort to any of their tools that they have on their belt. Those tools are there, but as a last source. Our main goal, and my main goal with training all my guards, is to be able to talk any situation down. So that is where most of our training really comes into place, is those type of tactics.
All right, thank you. Again, this is for Oz and Paul. How can, whether it's a grow facility or a provisioning center or anything in between, how can your two organizations work together for safe arrivals and departures, pickups and deliveries?
That's a great question. I think that for the type of service that Oz offers, we would rely on Oz and his company as our second set of eyes. They're the guys that are watching our backs. And procedurally, I think your insurance company likes that as well, to know that while we're in your facility, if you're lucky enough to have a facility that we can drive into and we have a contained area, a specified transport area, and we know that as we're driving in, the perimeter is secured to eliminate anybody from breaching through the door or providing a rush, so that they're watching us come in, they're providing the appropriate security while we're in there, while we do our jobs and we perform our own secured perimeter for our men and for our vehicles. They make sure that the actual environment that we're in is watched and secure. We would ask them for any insight, perhaps any routing suggestions or things that they might know about geographically or in the area. And in the same way, once we're prepared to leave, they would ultimately give us the clearance. We would rely on their eyes and ears to get us to something as close to the freeway. So in the same way, our company depends a lot on companies like his being able to make sure that we have a safe place to go in to either pick up or to deliver. Either way, there's a surprise every time that door opens for us.
Communication.
Absolutely.
Us?
And that's key. Communication is key when it comes to that point, because that is your most vulnerable time, is when a transport is coming in or leaving. That's when you have doors that are open, you have is just vulnerable right there. So knowing when a transport is coming in, so that way we can do our exterior perimeter checks to make sure everything is proper and ready for the transport to come in, and while the transport is in, providing the perimeter more on the exterior while they're taking care of the perimeter on the interior is key. So that way you have multiple different lines of defense if any type of breach were to happen. Especially during leaving point, at that point is making sure the doors are properly secured, and so they can exit the facility safely and move on to their next location.
Okay. Oz, how do you hold your security officers accountable to clients?
So the way I deal with my security officers and clients, it's funny because it's almost like a dating service. If you put it as that size. So I like to mold my guards in the setting that they're going to be in, because each provision area is different, each personality is different, each grow is different. So I have to find the right fit for that location. So it may take a couple tries, but honestly it goes into talking to the client and actually feeling what they need. And then me going back and going with my group of guys that I have, finding the right fit for that. And when it comes to accountability is, I myself work the field also. So I will be on your property at least once a month, making sure everything is okay. We having the constant contact with the client and the guard managers or anything like that to make sure what is being done and what is needing is being properly secured. We've also are rolling out body cams. I know a couple of our grow facilities I've asked not to, but that's up to the clients. And with the body cam, it's not just a body cam, it is a GPS location also. So that is 100% safety for my guards more than anything, because we know where we are at all times. So if there is an alarm, if there is a breach, if anything happens, I can exactly pinpoint where my guard is at any point in time. So that takes a lot on accountability, because I can show the clients also, say, hey, this is what they did and where they are.
Paul, where do you think a secure transport is most vulnerable to a holdup or a hijacking?
The simple answer is from the minute the door closes from the facility until the minute the door opens at the facility. And again, that has to do with the nature and the numerous amount of surprises. We all have seen a lot of action movies. You know, we've seen some of the Hollywood type of possibilities where anything could happen at any point. Do I think that a lot of those fantastical things are reality? No, but I think the crudeness of those who seek to intercept these vans is, again, it could be very Hollywood style, where you could get blocked in at a light, you could get T-boned at a light, you could have somebody put a pit maneuver anywhere on the road, you could just fall, you know, susceptible to, oh, hey, well, we did like an insurance fraud thing where the car stops short in front of you and you bump him and then you get out, and that's when the robbery occurs. So there's a lot of possibilities in terms of the encounters out there. I mean, our goal is to, once we leave the door, until we get to that door, our biggest goal is to stay moving. We become a much harder target to hit, and we don't open ourselves up to vulnerabilities or to opportunities if we don't stop. And that's, again, part of our logistics, part of our planning, and then part of knowing the area, part of knowing the client. And again, you know, talking with security is to say, hey, we're driving from the freeway to your door. Should we know about any security concerns between there? Is there a dead end that we should know about? Is there a one-lane road? Is there some type of bottleneck that creates a security concern that we should be more immediately aware of, on top of just the usual roadside type of hazards? But again, it's not the fear of one thing, it's the collision of all the what ifs. And that is something too that our insurance carrier likes to know about as well. Like, where do you think the problems are? Where do you think the dangers are? It's like, well,
there is none.
That's my answer too. Is like, What do you mean? We're in a van. No one knows this. Yeah. So.
All right, this next question, this is going to be the last one for a while for you guys because we're actually running out of time. Very controversial topic. And Jen, you can feel free to weigh in on this too. Security officers, whether it's on-site or transport, armed or unarmed.
Armed. Absolutely armed. So the difference between armed and unarmed. When you're unarmed, you're watching over property. When you're armed, you are protecting life. When it comes into the point of being an armed or unarmed guard, especially when you're looking at provision areas or anything like that, the number one safety goal, the number one goal for my guards, the number one goal for myself is the safety, the life of the employees working at that area, the life of my guard. So if there is a situation that occurs and there's an unarmed guard there, you could potentially have loss of life, where potentially you could protect yourself when you are in an armed situation. Look, product can grow back, life cannot. That's the bottom line.
Sure. Unfortunately, in Colorado, we've seen a Marine get killed, and he was an armed guard. So
he was armed?
He was armed, so it was a terrible thing.
Well, and that is the Pandora's box of being armed in any situation, regardless of the industry, is never mind let's forget the potential criminal liability, and let's talk about the actual livelihood or business liability. When you talk about dispensaries, provisioning centers having guns, they are an obvious target. Obvious targets need to have obvious defenses, because you walk in, you know what it is, and if the first thing you see is someone who can beat you to the punch or beat you to the trigger, that in itself has a deterrent. So I think there's a higher level of security in a more visible target that has a more pronounced and more visible means of security. In the same way I talked about how the grow ops and the non-conspicuous locations don't want armed guards, because then it raises the question of, I'm driving by this industrial complex in the middle of nowhere, and I would have never thought anything about it until I see two guys over there with guns, and that gets me thinking, what's so precious in there that requires guys walking outside with guns? Now you've made yourself a target by announcing your security. So that's where it has to do with, the more conspicuous the target, the more conspicuous the security has to be. A lot of my philosophy on firearms, whether it's personal carry or protection or whatever it is, unless you are an obvious target and needs an obvious security, your best security with guns, you should not know whether or not I have one. Because if I show up and you say, oh, that guy's secure transport, I bet you he's carrying a gun, you're not going to ask. And you're not going to play a game to find out, because in the back of your mind, you're like, it's in his pants, it's in his belt, it's somewhere else. You should know about it, because my first impression upon you shouldn't be that I'm someone to be afraid of, or someone that I have something that I need to protect, and I make myself a target just by indicating that I have an obvious form of security. So in that regard, our plan is to say, for our guards, you won't see their weapons. If you do, you won't remember seeing their weapons, because it will likely be used against you. In that same regard, that's a pretty good philosophy for security, is to say, if I need to use this weapon, it'll be used. If this weapon never needs to be seen, known about, or displayed, then we are all, I would say, safer, because especially in our situation where we are transient, I think that the presence of the weapon itself invites the problem, or at least creates the thought in the criminal's head that says, that guy's protecting something good. I don't know that it's marijuana, but whatever it is, I'm going to take a chance at it. So it becomes a personal philosophy as to what you withstand, what your insurance carrier wants you to do, and how much those premiums are. Mm-hmm. And then just as well, and we're talking about this too, is that if you have a guard who engages in some type of firefight or has to pull the trigger once, you're going to get sued. Whether you're going to get sued by someone who gets hit by the bullet, who someone is unintentional, the family, God forbid there's a death, you are going to have a trail of cleanup that just looks like a lot of civil liability. Never mind if you actually make contact with somebody and you have to go through and defend yourself. But I think that there's enough in terms of what you want and what you want out that says, here's the cost, here are the risks. My staff are okay with this. My client wants this, so we give them what they want and we coordinate what they want.
And just to add to that, that's 110% true. Like, especially dealing with grows and provisionaries, a lot of the grows don't want that presence out there. So we do have plainclothes, undercover, concealed carry, guards. You have the knowing of that you have an armed security there, but without the presence of it. Same with provisionary. A lot of provisionaries are moving to concealed carry, which is you have the presence of security, but you don't see that firearm there. There's just a presence there. You're not sure if he's armed or not. You're not going to see it unless you absolutely have to use it. And with insurance, that's 100% also.
Jen, as the end user, what would you prefer?
So as you might suspect with my background, I do have a preference for armed guards. I think deterrence is a big piece of keeping the criminals out of your facilities. The more that they can see those cameras, the more that they can see the signs on the outside of the buildings saying that they're under video surveillance, the more that they see that armed guard, the better. However, having said that, we are trying to create 19 provisioning centers across the state where we want customers to come in and feel a warm, friendly experience. From the time they walk through that door to the time they meet our bud tenders, we want to make sure that they have a very pleasant experience. And is it a pleasant experience if they meet an armed guard first thing they walk through that door? So it definitely is a balancing act. But again, I do agree that an armed guard is the way that we're leaning towards.
Recently, and I'm doing some work out in Las Vegas, there's a significant difference when you walk into a facility with the armed guard in tactical gear versus an unarmed security officer dressed down, but you know there's security. Now, they may or may not be carrying a firearm, you don't know, but you can't see it. And of course, Nevada is recreational, so you get a whole different customer coming in there. But there is a significant difference in the environment, in the feeling in there, and not a very good one when you get in there. It creates an uncomfortable thing. But we could carry on this debate for into tomorrow, so we won't. Okay, let's move on. Let's switch over to some quick cybersecurity questions. Can technology be used to help protect, especially in the grow, the processing, and the lab facilities, the testing labs, to protect their intellectual property? Can technology that, you know, Rudy, John, and Dave, you provide?
Absolutely. I mean, there's smart enough cameras out there. I mean, we were selling cameras 5-8 years ago to supermarkets that would tell you how long somebody's at an end cap or how long each cash register can flip a customer when a specific product comes off the shelf. It was a Spartan store in Canton. There was a ring of thieves that were stealing specific liquor bottles. So we set up a camera system at one of the stores where if that liquor bottle was picked up, it would send a text message to the manager, and they locked the store down and had the police ready, and we busted this ring that Walmart and Kroger and everybody else in CVS couldn't bust just based on these smart cameras. So I definitely think that whatever the application is for the end user, if they sit down with their integrator and tell them, hey, we're trying to accomplish this, any of us three guys up here can figure out the right camera and software to make it work.
Okay. John, you have anything?
Yeah, one of the things about what we do in the security world is we've got armed guards or unarmed guards, so you see a physical presence when you walk into a facility. Or you see the camera on the wall, or you see the card reader to get through a specific door. But what we don't see is the cyber part of this, is the people that are sitting there on their keyboard that are trying to penetrate your network to get in, and then once they get into your network, all your databases that you have on customers, on your financials, on your employees. So your IT person, your IT director has to be one of your most valuable employees and assets sitting right next to you. Because pretty much everything we do from a technology standpoint, whether it's the electronic security part of it or cyber security, your IT person, your IT director is going to be directly involved with. So that has to become one of your most valuable employees. And it's really, you know, even personally, we've all been either hacked, our emails have been hacked, or we get spammed. And you have no idea where this is coming from, where these attacks are coming from. And believe me, the Russians and the Chinese and a lot of other ISIS, a lot of other bad amigos out there are looking not only from a physical standpoint or electronic standpoint, but from a cyber standpoint, trying to disrupt what we do here in the United States.
David?
Unfortunately, cybersecurity is our biggest concern and the biggest vulnerability we have today. I don't care if it's in cannabis or if it's in any other type of world. Right now, it's the manufacturers that make the products that are at fault. Everything that is connected to the internet that is an edge device is acceptable to being hacked. So every one of these cameras, a card reader, anything that gets connected to this internet is a vulnerability point to you, and a 10-year-old kid can probably be able to penetrate your $300,000 security system with these awesome cameras with analytics and locks and safes, and be able to manipulate your data and then maybe hold it for hostage. And if you want to get it back, you need to write them a check with Bitcoin. So this is being in effect. All the ports have been hacked, Sony's been hacked. Right now there's only 2 manufacturers out there in the world that are concerned and actually have a game plan on trying to solve that, and that is Bosch and Genetech, and they've created a username and password elimination tool. So anything that has a username and password you would think would be secure, but that's actually the vulnerability point to that device. It's the actual backdoor entry to that, and every username and password can be hacked, and it also has a backdoor built into it. So this is a major concern. GDPR, the European Union, has kicked in some serious laws into play over there. They are on Congress's desk right now. They are looking to change rules here, and the security platform here in America will change come 2020. You'll notice a lot of the small integrators that love to buy things from Amazon and China, especially it's the Chinese that have been caught by our government hacking into our facilities, and when our government actually have presented the evidence to them, they said, yeah, that's true, here's a firmware update. So we realize we're not dealing with the same playing field. So it's something that manufacturers have to hop on board, and then we as integrators have to make sure we implement all these security procedures, because it's the weakest link right now.
So are you gentlemen saying that the cannabis facilities are subject to hacking?
Yes, sir.
The camera systems? Can we generally
Everybody's subject to hacking.
Right, but I'm talking in general. You know, people think of the physical security. I'm trying to get people to think, just as you are, more about coming in the back door, stealing things without you even knowing it, holding your HIPAA information hostage, which would shut down your business, probably cause you to lose your license. Lawsuits would follow and everything. So what can a client do to help prevent that?
I think IT department, like you said, if you don't have an IT department and you don't have the firewalls put in place, and you know, hiring a security integrator is not your answer to cybersecurity. There's multiple people who have to team up together on projects. So security is just not your integrator, like one of us 3, or your guard company or your transfer company. There's a big, you can't cut the corner of IT. You better be contracting or hiring a serious IT department if you're holding that information on your server, because it can, like you said, like Dave said, it's easily hacked. And that's for every company, and cannabis is going to fall right into it across the board.
There are companies that you can hire out there, penetration testing companies, and they will come in and test your network, penetration testing. They're the white hats, as they call them. The black hats are the bad guys out there that are trying to create disruption in networks, in databases, by penetrating your network, whether it's to a camera, a card reader, whatever the case may be. So you can hire these penetration testing companies, the white hats, and they can come in and test your network to see how vulnerable you are or not.
If you think back 50 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, not everything was hooked to the internet. Today, all of your phones are VoIP. Your access control is through the internet. Your cameras are through the internet. Everything you do, your phones are on Wi-Fi when you're at work. Everything is out there. So, you know, we didn't have that issue 20, 30 years ago. With analog cameras, it wasn't tied to the network. It plugged into a box.
Right.
You know, now everything is on your network.
Okay. Dave, real quick, and then we're going to have to move on.
Yeah, I mean, he's closed circuit was closed circuit. Now it's open platform for you to get on with your iPhone. So yeah, that allows it for everybody. And it's the scary piece that not only are they going to hold software ransom, but then they're able to, like with these guys' standard procedures, they're able to log into his cameras in his truck, they're able to log into the dispensary's cameras, they're able to log into his body camera, and then they're able to really specifically find the vulnerability spot then to hit him.
With all that said, with all that said, the state mandates that the facilities use metric. How vulnerable is metric? Or does that fall in the same category as everything else?
Same as everything else.
Worse, because it's already been hacked and it's already out there.
Yep, that's true, I know. So, for the technology professionals and for Paul, what technology are you putting into the secure transport vehicles? You touched on it, Paul, about cameras. How easy is it to install the cameras into secure transport vehicles? Some of the basic requirements that you guys would say is needed for Paul to protect his officers and his product.
I mean, obviously the body cams are great. The vehicle cams are great. You can go further with the vehicle cams. We've done vehicle cams where the driver sees 360 around his car at all times. There's a monitor mounted in the van, so he knows exactly what's around him at all times. I think that's, you know, years and years ago, I was in the armored truck business when I worked for a different alarm company when I first got into this business. My suggestion to the transporters is look at all the things that happened to armored truck guys over the years, all the different ways they were robbed, and look at all those scenarios and think that can be you. Because unfortunately, with cash being the issue here, it's not just like the pharmaceutical trucks. Yeah, they got a bunch of pills in there, right? But they don't have any money, too. You guys have to deal with money and marijuana. So it's a little bit different. My advice is look at everything the armored truck companies have dealt with over the last 20, 30 years. Every way they've been robbed. And protect yourself from those incidents the best you can. But you're vulnerable. I mean, you're in a car. There's really no way around it. You know?
John, last comment?
Yeah, I mean, it seems simple, but GPS in those vehicles, right? And have a piece of software that you can pull up on your phone even and say, all right, where are all my vehicles right now?
We have that too, and with that we can tell you where the vehicle is and we can tell you where your package is particularly. We also have this technology with one of our providers working for is essentially like a Bluetooth-based lock that you lock it at the facility. We would just pick up a locked box. Your employee knows the combination on the other end. We show up with a box, a locked box. Only the employee can open it. So all we're doing is transporting a box with a lock on it, and we have no idea other than on the manifest what are the contents. If that box gets lost, we have a tracking on the box itself. There's through the device on the lock, you can tell when the lock has been opened or tampered with. So if the truck flies off a cliff, we know where the truck is, but what happened to the boxes? Well, now we can account for the boxes. David?
The best procedure, I mean, we've kind of came up with this from a consulting perspective, is that question came and arise 1,000 times. How can we protect everybody? And the only real answer we created is Operations Center style monitoring. So now the facility has cameras, the truck has cameras. So the best thing to have is somebody eyes in the air watching. So you're having an operations center watching not only the facility, but we're also watching the vehicle all in real time. Everyone there is doing the same thing for their own entity, but we're able to watch the bird's eye view. So we're able to log into the cameras before the truck arrives to see if there's any random, Suburban sitting out front, or is there any threat that could be a possibility that we could address to the grow before the truck arrives. And then if it is an issue, then maybe we can detour the truck another 5 minutes for that thing to go away. And then we watch the transaction happen from a third party, because if there ever was a discrepancy, you're going to want a third party point of view to back you up. That was one of the only real reasons on a technology level, is being able to watch and kind of oversee everything and have instant communication to prevent it from happening.
And last question for the panel from me. It goes to Jen. Real quickly, we have some current or future cannabis entrepreneurs out there. How do they establish good working relationships with local law enforcement, the ones that are going to be coming in, inspecting them, and so forth? What's the key, Jen?
The key is a good relationship with those local first responders. And so the best way to establish that relationship is invite them right into your facility. Have your law enforcement, whether it's a local sheriff's department or a city fire department, give them a tour of that facility. We've had both our county sheriff's departments as well as city police departments, as well as our fire departments in our facilities, giving them tours both at day and nighttime, so that we engage both their command officers and then the officers that will actually be responding on night shift. Again, make them feel part of your business. Share those plans that you have, whether it's floor plans. Many 911 dispatch centers are set up with smart 911 systems, so that you can upload your floor plans right into their system. So if you had an emergency, a 911 call was placed from your facility, they can actually see what that looks like when they bring up your facility or your address. So that they would know where room 123 is in your building. Again, have those conversations with your first responders, again, whether it's police or fire or even ambulance, so that they know what your facility looks like. They want to know what your plans are. They want to know what chemicals you have in your facility. And again, those are all conversations that you should have prior to an emergency. I have my professional emergency management certification here in the state of Michigan, and the very first thing that they teach you in emergency management school is to know your first responders before an emergency happens, and that is key in this industry. Again, you want to make sure you know, on many different levels, that you have that relationship prior to an emergency.
Okay, thank you very much. We have about 5 minutes left. Are there any questions from the audience? Go ahead, sir.
Different routes for the same client in the event, and I'm not asking, I hope I'm not asking maybe proprietary, but you know, for the same client, I mean, because if anyone had nefarious purposes, all they would have to do is monitor the truck.
You want to keep your routes definitely random, and you want to be able to not have the same time spans. You know, you're not delivering every day Monday at 5 o'clock. You know, like, you're gonna have to have a randomizer. You could even find it on your iPhone. Whatever you want, just you break that up. Don't make a routine. You know, the worst thing about security is to have a routine.
Right, that's patterns are problems in our industry. If you know that this is happening on a regular basis, it makes your job much easier to take it from me. I think that some of the practical answers to how we avoid some problems have to do with the facility itself, and saying that, okay, well, we know that on the 1st of every month you harvest, so we'll see you either on the 3rd or the 4th, morning or afternoon, and that's something that's a private discussion with the facility itself, because typically the facility itself doesn't want to advertise, well, hey, we're harvesting here and we're transporting these days, because they become just as much of a target as well.
Yeah, it's kind of twofold too, that in this day and age of smash and grabs, ATMs, you have cameras and all of that, and that's fine. But what about those that have intentions on smashing and grab? You know, do any of you, from an IT security standpoint, have technology to prevent that?
From a smash and grab standpoint, my suggestion to my clients is to make it very hard to smash. You know, one of the things we do a lot with is we work with companies who do like a window film on their glass, so you can't just smash. We had an issue where people were breaking into cell phone stores across the state, and there was a little crew that was robbing and sending phones to Russia or something, iPhones or something like that, and it was smash and grab, get into a cabinet, steal a bunch of phones. Same scenario you can use in this industry. So what we did is we put some heavy film, we used a contractor of ours, and we made it impossible to get through the glass. And then second fold is we put glass break sensors in the buildings, and we put some outdoor siren strobe lights on their alarm. So once they tried to smash, they'll smash the glass, but they can't get in because of the film. But then the thing is so loud, the alarm screams so loud, it scares the shit out of everybody, and everybody splits, and then the cops are on their way. So everything is specific to the application, and that's worked really well.
In Denver, we had a pretty bad summer. We had a client get broken into 48 times, smash and grab. So even though that they were just smashing and grabbing, he was getting real pissed off that he kept having to replace windows and doors. So showing up every morning, getting yelled at because I was the guy showing up, replacing the door and window and trying to pull the footage for him, we wanted to try to figure out a solution on how do we actually prevent this from happening instead of reacting to it. Security, in a sense, all the way around, we've been doing it for years, is we react to it. We kind of let it happen and react. How can we prevent it? And then the only answer we had from that is doing an operations center, so we have 24/7 live guards watching all cameras. It's cheaper than a guard on site. You're able to do 100 cameras in one room. You're able to divide and conquer. You're able to cover mass areas. You're able to cover all warehouse districts. Any suspicious activity that we've seen, in Denver, there's warehouse districts right all over the place, and they kind of share areas. So if we're watching 4 or 5 facilities there, and there's a blue Suburban that pulls up to Medicine Man at 3 o'clock in the morning, drives by their facility, and then goes and parks in front of Mary's Medicinals, we don't have to wait for them to smash and grab. We know they're suspicious. We call the cops. We have them over there before they have the crime. It's the only answer.
Last question, sir.
Yeah, do the software solutions that you have for your security, for your cameras and whatnot, are those primarily on premise, or are the SaaS versions out there, either your own softwares or the ones you recommend?
Yeah, every application has its niche. So there's different softwares that you would use for different things, and when we have the amount of, like the high megapixel cameras, if that was the case, we may have to go this direction other than that direction. All the software is on site. Normally a lot of these regulations are mandated that the video retention is on site and everything has to be there, so cloud service is not an option in a sense. But that is also super important to think about on a redundancy level, because if you are a criminal and you kind of know what you're doing, if you did break in and you were able to take the DVR with you, they have actually no evidence that you were there. So to have that backed up is very important, and they started implementing that during the World Trade Centers for the government, due to the fact that you never saw any footage from the building out. You only saw it going in when it was going, because all the servers went down that were in the basement. So now the government mandated offsite video backup on all buildings. In certain states they require that. Illinois requires it, so Pennsylvania requires it. This is where regulations get cut and pasted from different things.
Yeah, you almost think it would be the exact opposite, especially from a disaster recovery standpoint, that if I got it out there in the cloud, then I don't have to really worry about it too much until it's recoverable. Whereas, especially from a law enforcement perspective, hey, I'd love to show you that stuff, but yeah, my server died, or got hacked, or fired, or whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So from a disaster recovery, from a compliance perspective, you would think they would almost force you to close.
You should, even if they don't force you.
Yeah.
So the issue with video is the packet sizes are so big. So to push it to the cloud, your pipe coming out of your facility is just going to have to be huge, and there's a cost to push that video out of your facility into the cloud.
Well, we've run out of time. I want to thank every one of our panel members. They did an outstanding job, and I can say truthfully that I would work with any of these professionals in any of the projects that I work on. They're great individuals. Thank you for your time. Very knowledgeable. I think we gave them some answers, some ways to go. And I believe, I'm going to speak for everybody, if you have any questions, I'm sure they'd meet with you individually, one-on-one, without a problem. For that, with that said, I think we